before you get to know more about us so that we know, who the pitch list is. So hands up, don't be afraid if you're an exhibitor, cinema owner, or operator. So yes, we have a few of you, that's super. Any integrators, any people who, do a hard day-to-day work? Sort of there. Any competitors come here to check out, what's being sold? Journalists, other people, stray people come from the casino floor? No? Okay, I think it's a good idea. Welcome to you all, one and all. I wanted to begin by saying that I realized as we sat down that we had yet another CinemaCon all-male panel, or a manel. But given that the topic of the discussion is how to squeeze a little bit more life out of old things, I think all five of us here are very qualified to talk about this. So I'm going to let each one of these, bright young things introduce themselves, starting at the end with Thomas MacCalla.
Thomas MacCalla. I'm a consultant for Convergent digital cinema.
Speak up a little bit.
It's
on.
It's on. It's on. It's on.
There you go. For recording purposes.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, back at the early times around the Entertainment Technology Center, we did the UK Film Council first rollout of digital cinema at the early 2000s. So we've been at it for a while.
Mark Lewis from Alamo Drafthouse, and started in the theater business the day I turned 16. I was dating a girl that was a year older, and she said, "Come work at the theater with me." And the rest is history. Since 1979, I've been involved all through high school, through college, and I worked for several other companies, but Alamo now for 4 years.
My name is Dean Bullock, and I've been working as an engineer mostly in the industry since the mid-90s. Most of my career is with Dolby Laboratories as a cinema processor engineer in digital cinema, etc. And then recently I joined Cinecert Incorporated as their COO, and we are a production digital cinema software company.
My name is Mark Collins. My background in cinema is I got sucked in at the age of 18. And I was the kid who was running movies at the drive-in theater. So I stayed with that for the next 5 or 6 years, got hired by a service company, worked for them for 15 years. So I've done the integration and installation side. Then I worked for 15 years on the exhibitor side, and I just decided I can't work anywhere more than 15 years. So now I'm working for Harman International. So in 15 years, I don't know what I'm going to do.
And I realized I didn't really qualify myself, did I? You have no idea what I do. You have a wife. Yes, you must be, yeah. But I've been obviously heavily involved in the technical side all those years. But I've been a technician and own my own company. And for Alamo Drafthouse, I am director of presentation, so I handle all of the AV, all the presentation AV.
Okay, thank you. And just to repeat for anybody just writing, and I'm Patrick von Sychowski. I've been writing about what these gentlemen and other people have been doing now for 20 years. And this year is a rather special year for many reasons. If you want to feel old, last weekend it was exactly 20 years since the first Matrix film came out in the cinema. How many went to see it in the cinema now? So, yeah, that's all. But it's also a special year because in May it is 20 years since the first film from a Hollywood studio was projected digitally in a commercial theater when Star Wars Episode 1 came out. And it's also 10 years ago since Avatar came out, really kick-started the whole digital conversion. So, digital cinema really got started between those 2 days, 20 years ago and 10 years ago. But what it means is that, 10 years on from Avatar, a lot has changed, but there's still a lot of things out there that are working, but are reaching a kind of critical stage in their development. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about. So looking specifically here, if you don't know, we've got a Series 1 projector up there sitting on the tower, projecting this beautiful image with the help of laser. And I just wanted to start off with looking back at these kind of early projectors. How many of them are still out there? What's the kind of universe we're talking about when we're talking about the old Series 1 legacy equipment? Thomas?
It depends on who you ask, but it's estimated somewhere between 9,500 and about 14,000. It seems like a big range depending upon who you ask. Still working on trying to narrow that down.
I can tell you at Alamo we just have I think 3 Series 1s left, and two of those will be replaced relatively soon. So very limited number now.
When I was working for Marcus, they've got about 10% of their projectors are still Series 1, mostly on the 3D rollout. So when 3D hit, Series 1 projectors were the only thing you could buy, and then when they actually did the rollout is when they started using Series 2.
We're calling them old, but maybe we should really call them vintage projectors because they really are like cars.
When was this one manufactured? Do you guys have
That's a
an
good
idea
question.
about when this was rolled off the line?
It's one of the first versions that came off the line because it's got an adjustment in the front that's one of the first assemblies. It's pretty early.
Yeah. And there are some variations between the different makers of the first generation, but I mean they were built solid, weren't they? I mean they were.
Yeah, it was early on.
Thomas, microphone?
Okay, so it was early on, and everyone had been used to film, where you were actually going to take the projectors and rebuild them over and over and over again. And so a lot of the discussions was going to be the resilience of these things. So it's early on how they were made. They were made very strong and very sturdy to be able to do what they were doing. And you have all the things associated with the early models. Obviously, efficiencies and other things came over time, but these first ones were probably engineered.
In fact, we're saying maybe they were over-engineered because what happened with the second generation?
No comment.
They were maybe more cost-effective,
They'd
maybe.
be more efficient, be more economical, all those other things that go with that, as you get better and better, and narrow things down, you cut other things off.
You know, as a technician, you open up a Series 1 projector, there's several boards, there's a big motherboard, there's cables everywhere. Once you start getting to the Series 2, and this is pretty much, any of the big 3 for DLP projectors, all of a sudden it's modular, all of a sudden you can pull out a light engine with just a couple screws and a couple cables. So it may have been over-engineered, but it did kind of look like a Heathkit project inside of a Series 1, where they really then, by Series 2, started putting them together so that it was much smaller, much less boards, and much easier to service.
So what defines when they come to the end of the lifespan? Is it just because they conk out, or is it because they can't do certain things?
Well, for me, it's a end of support. We have quite a few that are going to be within the next 2 years supportable end. Beyond that, it's the availability. Even if the availability of parts is still there, then you start to decide. What types of problems are we having with the equipment? Also looking ahead to the types of features that you may need, like let's say HDMI 2.0, 4K 60p, something like that. The capability of that, which would be on the horizon. So new technology, but also end of life support.
And it wasn't that much for us for end of life support. We were willing to take those chances, but really it comes down to you've got a brand new 2018 Honda, and then you've got a 20-year-old Honda in the garage. You still drive your 20-year-old Honda, but man, as it can be in the shop a lot. And so that's really where it's at, and it's up to the exhibitor to have that pain point. If it gets to the point where you're losing shows and things aren't happening because of an older piece of equipment, then it's time to change that out. But if there's methods to maintain that equipment, having the parts, things like that, then I can see some exhibitors just hanging on.
End of life support makes it sound like my 93-year-old auntie in her retirement home.
Maybe end of support life.
No, that doesn't sound bad. That doesn't sound bad.
But these projectors in the field, they can still do most of the things. So what are some of the things the problems that we're coming up against in terms of practical issues of technologies coming down the line that they can't support? And then we can get into discussions about upgrade and replacement cycles and what you can do to extend the life of it. So, Thomas, do you want to pick up on that maybe a bit?
Well, right at this point in time, the things you couldn't do would be extremely high frame rate, and you obviously can't do 4K. Outside of that, because of the fact you have the ability to put a Series 2 backward compatible, Atmos and all those other things, metadata.
Yeah, what are kind of server issues
Yeah.
associated with the first generation?
Well, you didn't have those things. You had the issues with the subtitling and things of that nature. And obviously, there's some patches there, but SMPTCP were not necessarily easily done without being certain upgrades to it. And then you couldn't do Dolby Atmos or any of those other things. Today, you can do those things with the backward compatible Series 2 system. So the things that you're down to only 2 areas that you really can't do. That's the 4K and the really high. You can do higher frame with that way.
I think there's this calculation about support lab. Those are some fairly sophisticated understanding of a large equipment rollout. You're buying things with warranty and things like that. There's certainly life for this type of equipment at smaller chains and smaller one-off screens that are, I know the transition is done, but they might need spare parts. They might want a second screen, that kind of stuff. So I think there's a life for this. And as Thomas was saying, a lot of the the newer types of capability, like even Atmos, you can buy an outboard CK50 Dolby. You can get I think there's one DTSX box shipping at this point that's outboard. So a lot of those features can be done with outboard equipment alongside the projector for a shop that isn't trying to, have everything the same across the line and, support contracts.
And when I was with Marcus, we definitely took some of our older equipment that we may have removed because we've added a screen and put in brand new projectors, things like that. So we had some old Series 1s that are available, and sure enough, it was the guy, in the next town who had a 3-plex, and he was excited to get a projector for a considerable discount in comparison to what we paid for it.
And there are certainly a lot of people that are surprised at the life of this equipment. So I've been in many discussions doing sales planning and production planning based upon a 5-year life cycle for servers, for example, because that's what Google uses, in their data centers. And it turns out that the cinema server isn't really, you don't get a competitive advantage on a cinema server by having the latest and greatest one. If it still plays a movie, it's a golden piece of equipment.
But when the digital projectors came around, they said, 35, you would have lasted for 20, 30 years. This would be like your PC, it'll be gone up to 5 years. But I've had MacBooks the last 10 years. I've switched out the hard drive, the memory, the screen, the keyboard, everything. But it's what you do, isn't it? It's, this isn't rocket science, exactly, extending life cycles.
Something else we've done with our old equipment is we've donated it. There's a homeless community in a support center, a support village in Austin, and called Noble Loaves and Fishes. And we set up an outdoor cinema for them with a 40-foot screen and donated a Series 1 projector to them. Just happens to get obviously. We'll fill that screen with it's an NEC 2500, and obviously plenty left, so still working great.
I should mention at the end of this presentation, we're going to hear a bit from our hosts about how they make this happen. We're going to show you some clips, as well, some trailers, so you get a flavor of what it is that laser on the first series looks like. But we've got some bad news before that, which is that it's official. VPF 2.0 ain't happening. I know the studios keep saying it, but no, really, they mean it. So they're not going to be forking up any more money. So
Kickstarter.
GoFundMe. Yes. But fortunately, I know for a fact that cinemas love spending money. They love upgrades of recliners.
Did you get a beer with that chair? I didn't understand.
I'm stuck with water, but I'm here all week. So.
Okay, great. Yes, no, I worked for an exhibitor for 15 years, and no, they do not like to spend money on anything. They cherished the idea of having a brinkered projector back in the day, and if anybody knows what a brinkered projector is, The factory burned down in 1958. I think that's right. But in 1993, they were still running one. So that's the mentality. That's the way that works. And so they are willing to put up with a little bit of pain to not have to necessarily reinvest. They're very, very willing to look at a new project and look at a new screen. So if they're building a new screen, things like that, they jump for a laser. When just a few months before I left Marcus, I had worked out a deal and made the announcement that Marcus was no longer going to buy a Xenon projector. And that at least then gives them the idea that they're moving in the right technology, the right way. But guess what? You go down the hall in that same building and there's a projector that was installed in 2007.
Well, I think the VPF change is really interesting. I mean, when we rolled out equipment in the early years, it was essentially subsidized. So deals were made. They're made differently. I mean, the money flows in a different way. And I think one of the things that's going to happen as we move away from steady state VPF is the exhibitors have the opportunity now to run their businesses more aligned with what they need and what they want. So there's going to be a marketplace for smaller equipment to, I call it spackle, to plug the cracks in the broken equipment. You can use software solutions between pieces of gear. You can use hardware solutions. I mean, there's a lot of vendors on the floor that have these little widgets that go in your theater that do analysis of lifetime of bulbs and projectors and collect data and all this stuff. And I think that market becomes a real market as the VPF changes, as exhibitors have to learn how to monetize their equipment without a VPF. And I think it's going to be really interesting to watch this switch to a kind of a more natural market. I don't think you're cheap. You're just trying to run a business. You've got to make a profit, and this equipment's expensive, so it's got to be paid for.
And once the VPFs are done for everybody, anybody who's gone through that, once it's gone away, all of a sudden there's a sense of freedom for your bookers. All of a sudden they can not really necessarily worry about, okay, do I have to do this many screens? Do I have to get VPFs for 4 screens, but I really want 5 screens? Because obviously in the digital world, if you decide at 7 o'clock on Friday night you want to run all the same movie, you technically can do that. But obviously there's business reasons why you wouldn't. So,
what are some kind of upgrade investment questions, decisions that Alamo, is it new taps, is it seeds? You got to think of it all.
It's perfect example is we've got a few locations in San Antonio that are in bad need of upgrade, not only equipment-wise, but also seats and as well as overall design of the building, refurbishing the building, and so on. But when it comes to the projection equipment, a little bit more urgency for us because we are one of our brand standards is 4K. We can argue all day about how much of a difference that makes, no matter what size screen it is. But we've just made that one of our brand standards, something we can always speak to. So in this particular case, in 2 locations, they have 2K projectors. So those just due to our brand standard, we'll be replacing those. And what we're going to replace them with is still, I still have a final decision to make on that. But some of our franchise partners, we have some franchise locations, they have chosen to, when opening a new venue, they have found VPF inventory at Sony, let's say, as one example, and they were able to, at a much cheaper cost, or basically just assume the VPF contract and build those projectors. So they're repurposing VPF projectors and continuing on until that contract runs out.
I want to open up the floor for questions. Do we also have microphones, so do we just
Nope.
yell out? So if anybody has any burning question now, we can take it, or we can keep the discussion going here. Just stick your hand up, don't be afraid. Well,
Seems like that little bit on subtitles. You were saying
question on
that,
subtitle. Yeah.
you were saying that the series 1 could not do the subtitling. I remember installing at the Cannes Film Festival and getting subtitling
What I
working.
said was the early Series 1 issues with subtitles. So some of these things could be back with patches and things like that. Obviously, if you have one that's handled Series 2 and taking care of all
Thomas
this,
Closen.
taking care of all these things backward compatible with the more rapid versions.
I see.
TI has issued a couple of updates, I think, for Series 1 that fixed the majority of those issues. I don't know that they're all completely
I
repaired.
think 3D still has an issue, right, in Series 1.
And then, of course, another fix was you always had the option of using the server for subtitles instead of the projector, so
Right.
we eliminated.
Brand dependent.
Yes. Yes.
And closed captioning related to that, subtitling and open captioning.
No, the caption equipment is all board, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Question from James?
Considering Series 1 and their media blocks with security managers which need to be held through their life, if you ignore them for over 6 months, they're dead. What's your opinion on how that's going to affect the
How to-
equipment?
How to care for security management? You said?
Yeah, so a media block which goes with Series 1, there's not a lot of them around either anymore, right? So if you've got a Series 1 projector, you'll need a Series 1 media block. And you can't leave a Series 1 media block sitting on the shelf unpowered for over 6 months.
And we had that exact issue. Guess what I did? We just plugged it in the booth. And it just sat
Can you
there.
repeat the question and then your answer?
Okay, I'm sorry. There's security features within the Series 1 that have batteries in it. And if the battery does wear out, then the security pops or just ends. And then the board basically becomes a brick unless you can send it back someplace and get it repaired. And so to avoid that, what we did was we had a few Series 1s that I was trying to get rid of, trying to sell, trying to do things, but I understood this issue. And so literally we wired up the projector in the theater it was at. All it did was be on, and that's how we avoided the issue.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that if the Series 1 goes off screen and is ignored,
Right. You're taking that chance, and then it becomes a much bigger brick.
yes.
And I think just a bit of a misnomer. It's an HDSDI media block. It's not necessarily Series 1 is the projector kind of manufacturing series. And I think that people will have to understand that there are some quirks to the security hardware, the cryptographic hardware. And there's Series 2 media blocks that I know of that also need to be plugged in when they're not inside the projectors.
They have the same issue.
Right, because they have
It's not
super
just
caps
Series 1.
or batteries or something like that, because the FIPS requirement is that when that key, you lose power, the key's gone and it won't decrypt.
I just wanted to mention that because a lot of exhibitors don't understand that.
Some of them do.
Some of
Yeah.
them do. A lot of them don't.
Anybody who's using one does.
That's right. But you go to old exhibitors and they'll have equipment that's been on the shelf for 2 or 3 years. They expect to be able to pull it out and start running with it again.
We just recently had to replace a gore board on a Series 1, and my first question to them was, have you kept this plugged in, sitting on the shelf? And they said, what are you talking about? And I said, I don't want it. So yeah, either by being forced to learn about it or by knowing it ahead of time. I think there's a lot of us that are.
And I think that is the scare that's out there, and I got out of Marcus just in time. Was not my problem, I know. But what's going to happen, and it's kind of hidden. What's going to happen? There will be a failure of a specific board, and then you are done. That projector is finished. Now, the ones here, we're going to tear that projector apart. We're going to make sure we got lenses, we got other spare parts, things like that. We're going to take out of it, but it is going to be out of commission at that point.
So just a couple, I know you mentioned something about the HDSDI media blocks. I'm pretty sure that there's at least one block that's being manufactured that has a CTP compliant connection device for a Series 2 that produces HDSDI outputs that use link encryption, which can be used with a Series 1 projector. I'm not sure what the brands and stuff are, but I'm fairly certain there's at least one available that is being manufactured today.
Yeah.
I feel we could sit here and share the pain of
Yeah.
these issues.
Well, one more story.
Yeah.
Just take a second. I'm not going to say what theater it is, but I just heard about a theater that there's no DCI police in the room, are they? But it's a theater that has a Series 1 projector with a GDC server and no gore board. just the interface board, and all they've done is kept the software on the server below DCI compliance, and they're still running. We were all told that that was going to be impossible, but they've never had a problem running content.
No journalists in the firm.
Well, I don't even
Oh, no,
think there's anything to worry about. There is no DCI credits, and it isn't that theater's issue. If you have content and you want it to play back only on DCI compliant equipment, that projector, you understand that equipment is not DCI compliant as content owner.
What about after April?
So it's up to the content owner.
After April, Cinecert DCP.
Yeah. I haven't heard if they've run any SIMD DCPs yet. That's good. That's good.
We'll get on to that. Anyway, I want to touch a little bit on the issue of lasers, because whether a cinema buys a new RGB laser, blue phosphor, or upgrades an old, let's talk about the benefits. Are there significant material benefits to exhibitors? Are there benefits to the audiences? Can we quantify this, or do we just have a feeling that yes, it's better?
For us, for any exhibit, you've got two different decisions. You look at an RGB laser, it's going to give you a much larger color gamut. It's going to be somewhat ready for high dynamic range. But for us, the decision was we need more more light on a bigger screen. That was the big thing. All of a sudden, trying to push a 6K and then a 7K bulb to fill an 85-foot screen was no longer an option. And so for us, it was light. And when you talk about light, now you got more options. You can do blue phosphorus, you can do the hybrid that NEC does with their RBB lasers. So there's a benefit, but if you just look at the cost analysis works better on a bigger screen because you're putting in much bigger bulbs, you have much more heat, a lot of things that you no longer have to deal with the laser, and your payback is quicker. If you're thinking you're going to go in and replace all your 2K bulb projectors with lasers, the payback is going to be definitely longer.
And we, same thing about light. We have some Sony projectors that without a brand new bulb in them, we can't hit our light spec. We have very strict standards now about light levels, and our light levels are checked regularly by projectionists and as well as people in the presentation team.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
We still have projections at Alamo Drafthouse. And we also have members of our, we go out and do regular quality assessments of every screen. And these particular locations, we don't hit light level unless we have a new bulb, but we change that bulb. So we're getting maybe a half to 2/3 light out of this lamp at most. We're replacing it that much more often. That's some of the first options I'm looking at for this conversion is can we get more light? We've swapped optical blocks. We've changed out LRDs. We've had Sony engineers come in and for whatever reason, tilted the projector and got the image, back out of the bottom of the lens into the center of the image in the lens to avoid any vignetting, and still can't gain the light that we're supposed to get. So I'm hoping that we can gain more light from a laser source.
Definitely respect that. And respect to Alamo for paying for that. Thomas, did you want to? Oh, okay. Did anybody else have any questions? Any stories to share? Any confessions to the DCI police? Oh.
I'm not confessing to the DCI police. We've been running the DigiCity server now for 10 years.
Thomas, do you want to give him a microphone so we can just... You can do it. Welcome to the stage. Justin Ribbons.
I just want to say we've been running the DigiCity servers behind the projectors for around 10 years. We've got a mixture of Series 1 and Series 2s, and we sort of moved them down a little in terms of the light levels, and we tried originally to get sufficient light and even over-spec them originally. But one of the things we're doing is with the software, and because it's software based, you can replace the servers. So we've got them all on Dells at the moment, and we can sort of upgrade the base servers and just change the boards out, so it makes it a hell of a lot more flexible to keep them going and keep them operating. And I absolutely agree. I mean, we've got to keep this kit going as long as possible. We've got to make sure we squeeze the last out of it, because as an operator, that's really where my profit is, and I can't afford to keep buying this equipment all the time. And I'm getting pushed all the time to buy more and more and better and better. And you know, the images we've got on the screen are great at the moment, and we're not into the 4K because we can't get 4K films at the moment in the UK. I don't know what's available in the States, but they're certainly not available in the UK at the moment at any point.
Well, that's a good way to end it. I think
Well,
we're going to have to wrap it.
no,
I will come to you. So we're going to have a comment each from our panelists, and then we're going to go over and have some final words and also show you the trailer. So, but sorry, Thomas.
To
Concluding
build
remarks.
on your point, you've got all these things coming out now that you're seeing at the show with laser, the concept of LED, the idea of all this push, and the idea is that you want to be able to make these choices on your time. And the idea is that now you have the tools that you can pace things to just say that I want to, based on my strategy, to go into this here or that there at your own time frame. And those things are available, and you're not necessarily being forced to burn the boats in the back to be able to take them forward. So hopefully, this discussion helps
And we're just as interested in trying to extend the life of our equipment as well. I mean, all corporate-wise, we don't refurbish equipment. We don't buy refurbished equipment. We do buy all new. But we're leaving that option open to our franchise partners, and they are even more interested in the possibility of certain retrofits that may extend the life of the equipment or whatever. But and one other thing that we do to try to help in extending life as much as possible, which most people in the industry don't do, is we pay for 4 PMs a year. So we have our third-party technicians come in, and they have a very strict process they're supposed to follow for each of those PMs, reporting back to us on what they find, so they can help us maintain that quality, but also hopefully extend the life of the equipment.
I think the thing that's interesting to me moving forward is I think that there's going to be much more of a cottage industry, much like we saw in the 90s and early 2000s, of people making small devices that keep equipment moving. I mean, I actually wouldn't be surprised if somebody smart comes along and figures out how to repair that board that breaks in the Series 1s. Right? It's electronics, and there are electrical engineers that are always out trying to make a living and be entrepreneurs. This show 10 years ago was stuffed with, connector manufacturers and move one wire to another, take this Dolby output and put it into this, amp output. I think you're going to see more of that as the industry is less kind of run by a bank.
For me, it's the same principle. We understand what the exhibitors want, and I would be a little bit remiss and not to mention audio, because there's a lot of theaters that are out there that may have fairly old speakers, and they need to at least evaluate what's out there. Just as a general rule of thumb, buy more subs.
And that's also a good way to end it. Right, that's it from us and the panel. We're going to hand back to our hosts, and we're going to get to see some great clips as well. But could we have a round of applause really for this guy?